my questions just range from general to specific, and I have 7 of them.
Okay.
So, my first question is, can you say the name of your rehab center and the treatment process that patients go through?
The name of the facility is Serenity Acres Treatment Center. The process that the patients go through begins basically at the time that they first call in. We do an intake assessment over the phone to assess the needs of each client. And then we determine what level of care we'll ask for from the insurance company, and that will determine their course of treatment while they're in here. So treatment typically utilizes medical aspects. So we treat the patient from a medical viewpoint that treats them from psychosocial perspective in terms of education about addiction and recovery, and then it looks at the aftercare process and setting up goals and treatment planning, looking at where they're going to go after they leave treatment. So we try not to just, stop at the end of treatment. We try to set up a plan so that when people leave, they have appointments set up, they have further care once they're out of treatment with either individual therapists, psychiatrists, going back to their primary care doctor, or going into what they call an intensive outpatient program. Sometimes that even includes going into a sober living environment rather than going back home or back to wherever they've been living. If it's an environment that is not conducive to them staying sober, then we'll recommend that they do something different and put them in a safer environment.
Okay. In your experience as a substance abuse counselor, have you ever, what do you see as common habits of habitual drug users?
Common habits of individual drug users?
Yeah.
They have a tendency to hang out with the same people. They're very reluctant to give up their old friends, which makes it very difficult to remain abstinent. I would say probably one of the biggest tendencies is that addicts also get a big, I'm going to call it a hit, but they get a big charge out of getting away with stuff. Getting away with lying, getting away with behaviors. And that's pretty much across the board for most addicts. They like to get away with things. That makes them feel something. I'm not sure what it is, but they feel something. And that contributes to the addiction as well.
Okay. So in a 2013 survey that I read, it was stated that drug use was highest in people in their teens and early 20s. Why do you think that's the reason?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I will blame my generation of parents who are, now in their 50s, because that's what I am, and I've raised a child, that we were very permissive with our children. I've heard it said we sort of bubble wrapped the playground, and we didn't allow our kids to really overcome challenges or struggle. Mm-hmm. So we gave them everything, and we didn't teach them how to work for stuff. So there's a lot of young people who don't like to feel difficult feelings. Yeah. They don't really like to struggle in any sort of way and feel like they shouldn't have to. So when it occurs, which it's going to in life, they would rather find a way to avoid it, and they often do that through drugs. They want to numb out, is what they say most of the time.
Oh, okay. So at your facility, is there a common or particular economic, racial, or age demographics that you treat?
No, funny thing about addiction, and I've worked in two different places, both that had very different demographic focuses, you might think, but it's a really diverse population. Very, very diverse population. We work with our local crisis response in Anne Arundel County.
Mm-hmm.
So we get people who have been homeless and living on the streets. We get people who are very highly educated. We get people who are older, people who are in their 20s. The ratio is still probably a larger ratio in their 20s than the older population. The older population still tends to be more alcohol-driven. The younger population tends to be more opiate-driven in this current epidemic that we're facing. But it runs the gamut in terms of diversity and cultural differences and education, and it really does. Makes it interesting.
Yeah. And also, how do you believe that how can habitual drug use lower a person's economic status, in your opinion?
It renders them generally unable to function in terms of maintaining their job status. Oftentimes there's job loss, which impacts their economic structure. There may be injuries as a result of, people often can end up on disability as a result of, and that impacts them financially and economically.
Okay. And despite the range of drug use being pretty diverse among people, do you believe that there's a clear link between poverty and drug use?
I think there has been in the past, but I don't think in the current situation that we're in now with opiate abuse that is necessarily true. I think there's always been addiction, and it's always been an epidemic, and that's been much more highly driven than by poverty. But currently, I've seen it sort of overrun into all areas economically. So I don't think that's as true today as it has been in the past. The need for treatment and the availability for treatment, however, that is impacted by socioeconomics.
Oh, okay. Also, a follow-up question that I have to what I just asked is, do you think it's more difficult for people who have a lower economic status to fight addiction? Like, do you think that,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Right now I do. I think it's become more difficult for people to get treatment who don't have insurance or are on medical assistance or Medicare. Those opportunities and that insurance coverage has changed over the last couple of years, and that's really, really made it very difficult for people.
Alright, and my last question that I have to you today, during my research, I found that, due to the legalization of marijuana, like that's becoming the more common drug that is used among people. Do you believe that recreational use of marijuana can be a precursor to more dangerous drugs?
I don't think it's really going to impact drug use any more than it has in the past. I don't think legality has ever really had that much of an impact. I think alcohol is a gateway. I think marijuana is a gateway. The effects of those really are much more impacted when people are using harder drugs and then they try to go back to using just marijuana or just drinking, and they say it's not a problem. Once they've gone over the line, they're going to go back to that drug of choice, so to speak. They're gonna end up relapsing back onto, and there's a progressiveness to the disease of addiction that people really really don't understand and don't believe, so that eventually the marijuana generally isn't potent enough for people, and they want something stronger. So, I guess the simple answer is yes, but I don't think legalizing it is really going to have that much more of an impact. In fact, they'll put age limits on it, like they did with alcohol and that kind of stuff. But that doesn't stop people.
Okay, thank you so much for your for allowing me to interview you. Your insight has been very helpful for my project.
Good, I'm glad, and good luck on your project. It sounds really interesting.
In the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, drug abuse and use is a constant epidemic. It affects many people, especially teens, in this area. According to the Baltimore Sun, the number of people who died in Maryland from drug and alcohol-related overdoses surged 66% in 2016, compared with 2015, exposing the magnitude of the growing opioid epidemic and the ineffectiveness of the increased resources aimed at stemming death. Back at American history, drug abuse patterns and trends have always shown prevalence. For example, former President Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971. Throughout the Washington, D.C. and Maryland region, cocaine, marijuana, and heroin continue to be the primary illicit drug problems we as Americans face in this society today. In 2012, heroin intoxication deaths increased in Maryland, and prescription opioid deaths increased. Heroin intoxication deaths increased by 66% in Baltimore. Baltimore accounted for 1 in 3 heroin intoxication deaths in the state of Maryland.
According to data collected by the Health Maryland Government Association, the leading cause of death among those experiencing homelessness is drugs, alcohol, accidents, or other injuries, and hypothermia. Hypothermia exists during the cold weather and can be a single cause of death or a contributing factor that leads to death. The risk of developing hypothermia is raised substantially by the use of alcohol, nicotine, drugs, and other medications, as alcohol and other drugs that alter mood and cognition are associated with increased mortality from hypothermia.
Alright, so although drug use is prevalent in poverty-stricken areas, it is important to understand that drugs affect people from all walks of life. It should be known that people who are long-term unemployed, dropouts, and those who have unstable housing are more likely to do drugs. And other people at risk include people who suffer from childhood trauma and mental illness.
So I just wanted to share a little personal experience and narrative of how I have friends that may abuse drugs or abuse marijuana for that matter. I tend to have a lot of classmates and peers that use marijuana, and they seem to think that they're not addicted to it, but in reality they are addicted because they tend to abuse it on the weekends, after school, before school. And to them, it doesn't seem like an addiction, but in fact it is. I'd also like to point out the fact that marijuana is a gateway drug. From my experience, I have friends that they start with marijuana, they start experimenting with it, and then it leads to other drugs such as lean, Percocet, acid, and other, more dangerous class drugs. So some of my classmates, they tend to host parties or small get-togethers where they come together and they experiment with these drugs or they try them out. Also, alcohol is not considered a drug per se, but it is something that is overused, and a lot of my friends are underage drinkers.